Hey guys, Assalamu Alaikum. Tonight, let's slow everything down. Dim the lights. Put the phone face down. Let the world gently wander off for a bit. Tonight, we're going very far back. Not just before kings and crowns, not even before time zones and calendars. We're going back to before there was anything to argue about at all. This is the story of how Allah created the universe, according to the Qur'an and the Hadith. And we're going to tell it slowly, calmly, without shouting, without drama. Just a quiet drift through cosmic beginnings, divine intention, and the oddly peaceful way Islamic tradition describes existence coming into being. So take a breath, let your shoulders drop, and let's begin before the beginning. Before space had anywhere to stretch out, before time had somewhere to tick, before light had anything to shine on, there was Allah. And that's it. No supporting cast, no background noise, no celestial humming in the distance, just Allah, eternal, uncreated, and not waiting around for anything to happen. In Islamic belief, Allah does not come from anywhere. He is not born. He does not age. He does not improve with time, because time itself is something He creates later, casually, when He feels like it. The Quran is very clear about this. Allah is Al-Awwal, the first, and also Al-Akhir, the last, which is a neat way of saying He's not stuck inside the timeline the rest of us are desperately trying to keep up with. There is no moment where Allah is bored and says, "Well, I guess I'll make a universe." There is no divine procrastination, no celestial planning committee. Creation is not an experiment. It's not a reaction. It's not a solution to loneliness. It is will. And in Islamic theology, that distinction matters a lot. Allah creates because He wills to create, not because He needs anything, not because He lacks anything, and definitely not because He wants company. In fact, one of the calmest and most repeated ideas in the Quran is that Allah is completely independent of creation. The universe doesn't prop Him up. He doesn't lean on it emotionally. He doesn't check in to see how it's doing. Creation exists because He allows it to exist. And that's a very different vibe from most mythological origin stories, which tend to involve chaos, fights, accidents, or gods behaving badly after a long night out. Here, there is no mess to clean up, just intention. Before the universe, there is something described in Hadith literature as al-Arsh, the throne. Now, don't imagine a chair. This isn't a literal seat with armrests and cushions. The throne represents authority, dominion, and absolute control. It exists before the heavens and the earth, and it is described as being over the waters. And yes, there are waters before the universe, which is interesting. Not oceans, not waves, just existence described in a way humans can mentally approach without immediately short-circuiting. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said that Allah was, and there was nothing else besides Him, and His throne was over the water. That's it. That's the scene. No stars, no atoms, no light speed. Just Allah, the throne, and water. And even that water is created, not eternal, simply part of the earliest stage of existence. From here, Allah creates the kalam, the pen. And this is where things get quietly heavy. The pen is commanded to write, and it asks, because yes, it asks, what shall I write? Allah tells it to write everything that will ever happen, every detail,
every moment, every choice, every outcome. From the beginning of creation until the end of time. And the pen writes it all, not in a rush, not with panic, just calmly recording reality before reality unfolds. This concept, al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, is central to Islamic cosmology. It's not fate in the dramatic sense, it's not a trap, it's divine knowledge existing outside of time. Allah already knows the story because He isn't inside the story, and nothing surprises Him, which, frankly, must be nice. Now, at this point, nothing physical exists as we know it. No galaxies drifting lazily, no planets spinning quietly in the dark. But the framework is there: knowledge, will, command. And then creation begins. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that Allah creates through command. He says, be, kun, and it is. No labor, no exhaustion, no dramatic pause. Creation is effortless, which is gently emphasized in the Quran by reminding us that Allah does not rest after creating the heavens and the earth. There is no seventh-day fatigue, no divine nap. The universe doesn't tire Him out. And now, slowly, the cosmos takes shape. The Quran describes the heavens and the earth as once being a single entity, joined together, before being separated. Do not those who disbelieve see that the heavens and the earth were joined together, and we split them apart? This is not a science textbook, but it is a striking image. One unified existence, then separation. Space expanding, structure forming. And Allah creates the heavens, 7 heavens, layered, ordered, purposeful. Again, not chaotic, not accidental. The Quran often invites the listener to look up and notice the lack of cracks, the lack of disorder, the absence of error. Which is a subtle flex, honestly. It's saying, look again, look closer, you won't find a flaw. And all of this is created in stages. Not because Allah needs stages, He doesn't, but creation itself unfolds gradually. Time is introduced, measure, sequence. Days are mentioned, 6 of them, but these are not human days with sunsets and alarm clocks. They are periods, phases. Time exists because Allah allows it to exist. And within these stages, Allah creates light and darkness, day and night. Not as enemies, not in a battle, just rhythm, balance. And then comes the formation of the earth, spread out, stabilized, mountains placed like anchors, which again is described calmly. No explosions, no shouting, just intentional placement. Water flows, rain descends, vegetation emerges, not rushed. The Quran describes Allah as loving beauty and balance, and creation reflects that. The sky becomes a canopy, the earth becomes a cradle. And throughout all of this, Allah remains completely distinct from creation. He does not enter it, He does not become part of it. There is no incarnation here, no merging. Creator and creation are separate, always. And this is repeated often because humans have a habit of getting confused about that. Now, before humans appear, which we will get to later, very slowly, Allah creates the angels. And angels are not chubby babies with wings. They do not float around playing harps. They are beings of light, created for obedience. They do not rebel. They do not get tired. They do not ask philosophical questions at 3 a.m. They simply do what they are commanded. Some carry messages, some manage natural forces, some record actions, some surround the throne glorifying Allah constantly, and they are numerous beyond counting. Which again reinforces the idea that Allah does not need creation. Creation exists to fulfill roles, not to fill a void. Alongside angels, Allah creates the jinn, beings made from smokeless fire, given choice, given free will, capable of belief and disbelief, which, as we'll eventually see, becomes relevant. But for now, creation is still orderly. The universe hums quietly into existence. Stars ignite, galaxies form. Everything moves according to command, and Allah watches, not with curiosity, but with complete knowledge. Nothing catches him off guard. Nothing requires adjustment. Creation.
All right, let's keep going. No need to sit up, no dramatic recap, we're just drifting forward, exactly where we left off. The universe exists now, which is still kind of a big deal. Stars are quietly burning, galaxies are minding their own business, the heavens are layered and orderly, like shelves no one ever bumps into. And the earth is being prepared, not hurried, not slapped together at the last minute. The Quran describes the earth as something Allah spread out, leveled, balanced. Mountains are placed, not dropped aggressively, but set like weights, keeping things stable, which is a nice mental image. Less apocalypse, more careful arrangement. Water flows across the surface, rivers form, rain falls, vegetation grows. And here's the calm part. Allah describes all of this as provision, not decoration, not flexing power, provision, meaning this world is already being shaped with future inhabitants in mind. Someone will need food, someone will need shelter, someone will need rhythms, seasons, days, nights to orient themselves. And those someones are not angels. Angels don't need crops, they don't need rest. They don't need mountains or oceans or sunsets. This world is being tuned for something else, something more complicated. Now, while all this physical creation is unfolding, the unseen world is already busy. Angels are everywhere, each with their role. No confusion, no burnout. They glorify Allah constantly, not because they're forced to, but because that is literally what they are made to do. They do not doubt, they do not hesitate, they do not negotiate. And then there are the jinn, created earlier from smokeless fire, living on the earth before humans, capable of choice, some obedient, some not, which tells us something important. Free will is not new when humans arrive. It already exists, and it already causes problems. Among the jinn is one particular figure who becomes relevant. His name is Iblis, and at this point in the story, he's doing pretty well for himself. He's not some obvious villain lurking in the corner. He's devoted. He worships Allah extensively, so much so that he is elevated among the angels. Not one of them, he's still a jinn, but among them, which honestly probably goes to his head a bit. Now, Allah announces something new, a decision, a plan. I am placing a vice-regent on earth, a Khalifa, a representative. And the angels, who normally do not question, ask something, not rebelliously, not sarcastically, just curiously. They ask if this new creation will cause corruption and bloodshed, which tells us they already understand something about free will. They've seen what choice can do. Allah responds calmly, I know what you do not know. No argument, no explanation, just that. And then creation begins again, but this time differently. Allah creates Adam, not from fire, not from light, from clay, earth, dust, something simple, something quiet. And Adam is shaped deliberately, not rushed. The Quran describes stages, form, proportion, and then the pause.
Adam exists, but he is not alive yet, just a form. And during this time, Iblis notices him, walks around him, observes, which is already not great energy. And finally, Allah breathes into Adam from his spirit. Not a piece of Allah, let's be very clear, but a created spirit, honored by being attributed to him. And Adam lives. The first human opens his eyes, and immediately something unique happens. Allah teaches Adam names, knowledge, understanding, not instinct alone, not blind obedience, cognitive awareness. And then Allah presents Adam to the angels and asks them to name things. They can't. They admit it openly. They know only what Allah has taught them. Adam, however, can name them, which quietly establishes the role of humans in Islamic theology, not stronger than angels, not pure, but capable of learning, reasoning, and carrying knowledge. And now comes the moment. Allah commands the angels to prostrate to Adam. Not worship. Prostration here is honor, recognition. And they all do, immediately, without hesitation, except one, Iblis. And here's where things get uncomfortably human. Iblis refuses, not loudly, not dramatically, just no. And Allah asks him why, which is interesting, because Allah already knows the answer. But this is not about information, it's about exposure. Iblis answers. He says, he is better, created from fire. Adam is created from clay. And there it is, the first recorded act of arrogance. Not ignorance, not confusion, comparison. I am better. And Allah responds, not angrily, not emotionally, but decisively. Iblis is cast out, stripped of his status, not destroyed, just removed. And Iblis responds, predictably. He doesn't repent. He doubles down. He asks for time, until the day of judgment. And Allah grants it, which again is very calm. No cosmic shouting match, just allowance. Iblis vows to mislead humanity, from the front, from behind, from the sides, all directions covered. And Allah tells him that he will have no power over sincere servants, only over those who choose to follow him, which quietly reinforces the theme. Misguidance is not forced, it's invited. And now humanity officially exists. Adam is placed in paradise, not earth yet, paradise, a place of ease, of provision without effort. And Adam is not alone for long. Allah creates Hawa, Eve, from Adam as a companion, not a clone, not a subordinate, a partner. And they live peacefully, no hunger, no pain, just one condition, one boundary. Do not approach this specific tree. No explanation, no long list of rules, just one. And of course, Iblis is still around, waiting, not rushing. And eventually, he whispers, not commands, suggests, plants doubt, makes the forbidden sound reasonable. And Adam and Hawa eat, not rebelliously, not arrogantly, forgetfully. And immediately they realize their mistake. They don't blame each other, they don't argue theology. They repent, they ask for forgiveness. And Allah forgives them, which is important, very important. Because this sets the tone for humanity. Humans will fail, but repentance is built into the system. Adam and Hawa are sent down to earth, not as punishment alone, but as part of the original plan. Earth was always meant to be inhabited, and Allah promises guidance, messengers, revelation, meaning humanity is not abandoned. And that's where we'll gently pause. The universe exists, Earth is populated, free will is active, and guidance will come. In the next part, we'll drift through humanity's early days, the spread of people, and the quiet beginning of prophecy, not as spectacle, but as mercy. But for now, just rest here, between heaven and earth, between intention and action, everything unfolding exactly as allowed, slowly, gently, and without rush.
All right. Still with me? Still comfortable? Still no reason to check the time. Let's just drift forward. Adam and Hawa are on earth now, which is quieter than paradise in some ways and much louder in others. The earth is vast, open, full of potential, and also full of effort. Food has to be grown, shelter has to be built. Nothing arrives automatically anymore, which is not framed as cruelty. It's framed as reality. Human life begins with learning, trial, mistake, adjustment. Adam is not just the first human, he is the first prophet, meaning guidance begins immediately. There's no long era where humanity is just left alone to figure things out. Allah speaks to Adam, teaches him, guides him, and Adam teaches his children. And humanity spreads, slowly at first, families becoming clans, clans becoming communities. And here's where things start to feel familiar, because humans don't stay aligned for very long. Some remain grateful, some remain conscious of Allah, others drift. They forget, they distort, they exaggerate. They start focusing more on personalities than principles. And Allah responds the same way, every time. He sends guidance. Prophets appear quietly among their people, not celebrities, not kings, often just ordinary men, chosen to remind, to warn gently, to encourage patience. And the message is always consistent. Worship Allah alone, be just, care for others, remember your purpose. Simple, almost suspiciously simple. But simplicity does not make it easy. Generations pass, people multiply, and over time something interesting happens. Good people die, respected people, people others admire, and humans, being humans, start memorializing them. At first it's harmless, just reminders, then symbols, then objects, then reverence, and eventually worship, which is how idolatry quietly enters the story, not through rebellion, but through sentimentality. People forget that reminders are not replacements. And Allah sends another prophet, Nuh, Moses. And Nuh's story is long, not because a lot happens, but because almost nothing changes. He preaches for centuries, and almost no one listens, which is exhausting, honestly. He speaks calmly, publicly, privately, night and day, and the response is mostly mocking, dismissal, shrugs. And when judgment finally comes, it's not described with drama for the sake of drama. It's framed as consequence, a reset. And after the flood, humanity starts again, smaller, quieter, but not permanently improved, because memory fades, ego returns, and Allah sends prophets again. Hud, Saleh, Shu'aib, each to different communities, each with the same core message, and each faces resistance, not always violent, often just stubborn. People don't like being told to change, especially when they're comfortable. And there's something very consistent in the Quran's tone here. It doesn't mock people loudly. It observes them. They argue semantics. They demand signs. They delay commitment. They ask prophets to bring angels or treasures or miracles on demand, as if guidance is a customer service issue. And Allah responds patiently, sometimes with signs, sometimes with warnings, sometimes with silence, because not every refusal needs fireworks. Meanwhile, humanity keeps organizing itself. Cities rise, trade develops, power concentrates, and with power comes hierarchy. Kings emerge, elites form. And here's where things start to feel uncomfortable, because the Quran repeatedly points out that resistance to guidance often comes from those with the most to lose: wealth, status, control. Not always, but often. Prophets rarely live luxurious lives. They don't blend in with ruling classes, and that alone makes people suspicious. Why should he tell us what to do? Which is timeless. Now, somewhere along this long, slow human story, something remarkable happens. Allah chooses one man to anchor a lineage: Abraham. And Ibrahim's story is quiet rebellion. He questions everything, not angrily, not arrogantly, just thoughtfully. He looks at stars, the moon, the sun, considers, then dismisses, because things that rise and fall cannot be God. And Ibrahim's faith is deeply personal. He smashes idols, yes, but even that is described almost casually, like someone finally getting tired of nonsense. He is tested repeatedly: migration, isolation, and the most difficult test of all, being asked to sacrifice his son, which is not about cruelty, it's about trust. And when Ibrahim shows willingness, Allah intervenes, because the point was never loss, it was submission. And from Ibrahim come lineages, prophets, nations. His story becomes foundational, and again Allah keeps sending guidance. Musa, Moses, raised in a palace, then exiled, then chosen. He confronts power directly, not with charisma, but with truth. And Pharaoh, who genuinely believes himself divine, collapses under his own arrogance, not because Musa is violent, but because false authority eventually eats itself. The Quran tells this calmly, almost like a case study. Power without humility is unstable. Eventually, Musa leads his people out. They wander, they complain, they forget miracles they personally witnessed, which is impressive in a frustrating way. And Allah remains patient. Law is given, structure is introduced, boundaries are clarified, not to suffocate, but to guide. After Musa, prophets continue. Dawood, Suleiman, kings and prophets combined, which sounds efficient and is actually complicated. Power and piety don't always mix smoothly, but these figures are portrayed not as flawless icons, but as humans accountable to God. Mistakes are acknowledged. Repentance is emphasized. And then comes Isa, Jesus, born miraculously, speaking truth gently, calling people back to sincerity, and once again misunderstood, opposed, and Allah raises him, protects him, and the message continues. But the original teachings begin to fragment, interpretations multiply, doctrines harden, and humanity does what it always does: it argues. And by now, the world is crowded, cultures overlap, empires rise and fall. Revelation has come repeatedly, and yet people forget, still distort, still reduce faith to identity instead of practice. Which brings us to the final phase, the last message. But not yet. For now, just notice the pattern: creation, guidance, forgetfulness, correction, over and over. Not because Allah enjoys repetition, but because humans need reminders. And the universe keeps going. Stars still burn, earth still spins, guidance still descends quietly through individuals chosen not for comfort, but for responsibility. In the next part, we'll drift gently toward the final revelation, the Quran itself, and how it frames the universe, not as a mystery to fear,
but as a sign to reflect on. But for now, just let the long arc of history stretch out, unrushed, unresolved, exactly the way it's always been.
All right, still floating, still steady. Human history has now stretched out long enough to feel heavy. Empires have risen, fallen, renamed themselves and fallen again. Prophets have come and gone, messages delivered, resisted, partially followed, then slowly reshaped by habit and convenience. And through all of it, the universe just keeps doing what it was told to do. Stars burn, seasons cycle, night follows day without complaining, which honestly makes humans look a bit dramatic by comparison. Now we drift forward to the Arabian Peninsula. Not a superpower, not an empire hub, just a crossroads, trade routes, tribes, oral poetry, a place where lineage matters deeply and written scripture not so much. Idols fill the Kaaba, tribal gods everywhere, not because people are philosophically committed to polytheism, but because it's familiar, inherited, normal, which is usually how things stick around. Into this setting is born Muhammad ibn Abdallah, and his early life is quiet. Orphaned young, raised by relatives, no royal upbringing, no prophecy aura glowing around him, just a boy growing up in Mecca. He becomes known as trustworthy, which is rare. People call him Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. Not flashy, not loud, reliable. And that reputation matters later, because when he eventually says, "This is from Allah," people cannot immediately dismiss him as a liar. They may call him mistaken, or deluded, or inconvenient, but not dishonest. As an adult, Muhammad spends time alone, reflecting, thinking, which is already unusual. Most people are too busy surviving or socializing to sit quietly with their thoughts. And then, one night, in a cave called Hira, revelation begins. Not gently, not poetically. An angel appears, Jibril, and commands him to read, which is awkward because Muhammad cannot read. This is not a smooth start. The encounter is intense, disorienting, and Muhammad leaves shaken, afraid, which matters because it tells us this is not something he wanted, not something he prepared for. Revelation is not treated like a reward, it's a burden. And slowly, piece by piece, the Qur'an is revealed. Not all at once, over 23 years, responding to situations, questions, conflicts. The Qur'an speaks about the universe constantly, but not academically. It doesn't lecture, it invites reflection. It points to the sky, the earth, the alternation of night and day, and it asks quietly, "Do you not see? Do you not think? Do you not reflect?" It frames creation not as mythology, but as signs, evidence, reminders. And here's the interesting part. The Quran does not describe creation to impress. It describes creation to humble. It repeatedly reminds humans how small they are. Not insignificantly small, just not central. You are part of this, not the point of it, which is a subtle but important distinction. The Quran emphasizes that Allah created everything with measure, balance, nothing excessive, nothing wasted. Even destruction has purpose. Even endings lead somewhere. And the universe, we're told, is expanding. Again, not a science lesson, just an observation, a reminder that creation is dynamic, alive, moving. The Quran constantly redirects attention away from idols, away from ancestry, back to the Creator. And this message is not popular. It disrupts economics, power structures, tribal hierarchies. People don't like being told their inherited beliefs are wrong, even when delivered calmly. Muhammad is mocked, ignored, boycotted, threatened. But he doesn't retaliate, not violently, not dramatically. He repeats the message, patiently. And the Quran continues revealing. Stories of earlier prophets are retold, not for nostalgia, for pattern recognition. You've seen this before. People resist, prophets persist, and consequences follow, eventually. The Quran describes Allah as Al-Rahman, deeply merciful, but not passive. Mercy does not mean chaos is allowed indefinitely. And slowly, people accept the message, not en masse, one by one, quiet conversions, which irritates leadership even more. Eventually, migration happens from Mecca to Medina, a turning point. A community forms. Law begins to structure daily life, not to dominate, but to stabilize. And the Quran continues guiding, covering belief, ethics, social responsibility, and always, always returning to creation. Look at how you were made. Look at where you live. Look at what sustains you. This did not happen accidentally. And Allah repeatedly emphasizes something important. He did not create humans to burden them. Worship is not meant to crush. It's meant to align, to remind, to bring humans back into harmony with the rest of creation. Which is quietly ironic, because everything else already obeys. Stars don't rebel. Oceans don't question. Only humans do. And they're the ones offered forgiveness, which feels generous. As Revelation concludes, the Quran frames the universe as temporary, not disposable, but not permanent. Everything has an end, and beyond that end, accountability. Not collective guilt, individual. No inherited guilt, no cosmic unfairness, just responsibility. And Allah makes it clear, creation will not be repeated out of need. Resurrection is not difficult. If creation happened once, it can happen again, effortlessly. Which circles us back to the beginning. Allah creates because He wills. He sustains because He wills. And when it ends, it will end because He wills. No panic, no surprise. And Muhammad passes away quietly. No throne, no monument, just a message left behind. The Quran remains, unchanged, recited, memorized, whispered in the dark, guiding not by force, but by invitation. And that's where the story gently rests. The universe exists, guidance exists, choice remains. Nothing rushed, nothing unfinished, just a long, quiet unfolding. And if you're still listening, that's kind of the point. In the final part, we'll gently zoom out, not to add drama, but to reflect on what this creation story is actually asking of the listener. Not excitement, not fear, just awareness. But for now, let the universe keep turning, exactly as it always has, calm, measured, and utterly unconcerned with our schedules.
All right, we're almost at the far edge now. Not the end, just the wide view, so stay still. Nothing new is about to jump out at you. This is the slow part where things settle. The Quranic creation story doesn't end with fireworks. It doesn't conclude with a triumphant chord or a final twist. It just leaves you there, standing on the earth, under the sky, aware. And that's deliberate, because unlike a myth meant to entertain, this story isn't trying to hold your attention forever. It's trying to return it to you. The Quran constantly zooms out. It talks about galaxies and mountains, then suddenly about a single human heart. It shifts scale effortlessly. One verse asks you to consider the heavens. The next asks why you lie, which is a strange transition, but an effective one. Because the message is not, look how big the universe is. The message is, given how big the universe is, why are you pretending your choices don't matter? Creation in Islamic theology is not neutral scenery. It is ayat, signs,
Not proofs in a courtroom sense, not equations, reminders, gentle taps on the shoulder. The sun rises every day without being asked. Rain falls without needing praise. Everything does what it was created to do, except humans. Humans hesitate, second-guess, rationalize. And yet, humans are the ones addressed directly. The Quran doesn't speak to mountains, it doesn't correct stars, it speaks to people, again and again, almost patiently to the point of absurdity. It acknowledges distraction, weakness, forgetfulness. It doesn't deny them, it works around them. Which brings us to the purpose question, the one humans always circle back to. Why create any of this? And the Quran answers plainly, I did not create jinn and humans except that they worship me. Which sounds heavy until you read how worship is actually described. Worship is not constant ritual. It's awareness, alignment, choosing truth over convenience, justice over impulse, gratitude over entitlement. Worship in this framework is not escape from the world, it's engagement with it correctly. And here's the softer part that often gets missed. Allah does not need this worship. The Quran constantly says it. If everyone disbelieved, Allah would lose nothing. If everyone believed, he would gain nothing. Worship benefits the one doing it, which makes it less of a demand and more of an offering. Creation, then, is not a trap. It's not a test designed for failure. It's an opportunity for meaning. And meaning, unlike comfort, takes effort. Now let's talk briefly about time, because the Quran does, a lot. Time is not just a background mechanic, it's a sign. Night is for rest, day is for movement. Not punishment, not reward, just rhythm. And humans are constantly warned not to waste it, not because Allah is counting minutes nervously, but because humans forget how limited they are. The universe will outlast you. That's not an insult, it's perspective. The Quran reminds listeners that past civilizations once thought they were permanent. They built monuments, declared dominance, and then became archaeology, which is not said with mockery, just fact. And you pass by their ruins. That's it. No gloating, just observation. Creation continues, people don't. And yet, despite all this cosmic scale, the Quran insists on something very personal. Allah is close, closer than your jugular vein, which is a deeply strange thing to say about a creator of galaxies. But that's the point. Transcendent and near, beyond comprehension and attentive, not distant, not detached. And that balance defines Islamic cosmology. Allah is not the universe, but He is not absent from it. He sustains it moment by moment. If that sustaining stopped, everything would quietly cease. No collapse, no noise, just gone. Which makes existence feel less chaotic, more intentional. Even suffering is framed carefully, not denied, not glorified, but contextualized. This world is not paradise. It was never meant to be. It's a place of growth, choice, struggle. And the Quran is clear. Ease alone does not refine people. Neither does suffering alone. Balance does. And then, gently, the Quran talks about the end. Not with panic, not with obsession, just certainty. The universe will fold back. The sky will change. Mountains will no longer behave like mountains, and humanity will be gathered, not as tribes, not as nations, as individuals, which is oddly leveling. No titles, no inheritance, just you and what you chose. And Allah's justice is emphasized. No one is wronged, not even by the weight of an atom, which is a strangely comforting detail. It implies attention, care, nothing overlooked. And after judgment comes permanence, not endless activity, not constant stimulation, rest, stability, reality without decay, which contrasts sharply with the universe we started with. This universe expands, changes, ends. The next does not. And so the Quranic creation story begins with Allah alone and ends with humanity facing Him, not as a species, as selves. And in between, a universe full of signs, not screaming for attention, just existing, waiting to be noticed. And that's where we stop. No cliffhanger, no dramatic music cue, just awareness. If you've been listening quietly this whole time, if your breathing slowed somewhere along the way, then this story has already done what it was meant to do. Not excite, not overwhelm, just remind. So let the stars keep burning, let the earth keep turning, and let yourself rest, knowing that, according to this tradition at least, none of this is random, none of it is wasted, and neither are you. Good night.
Part 6. The Long Afterthought, and Why Nothing is Actually Over. All right. If you're still here, good. That means we can take this even slower. Because one of the strangest things about the Quranic creation story is that it technically never ends. It just keeps pointing. Even after the universe is explained, even after humanity is addressed, even after the end of time is calmly mentioned, the text keeps circling back again and again, almost like it knows the human brain needs repetition to sink in. So let's linger in the aftermath a little longer. Creation, according to the Quran, is not just a past event, it's ongoing. Not in the sense that mountains are still popping into existence every afternoon, but in the sense that sustaining is a continuous act. Allah is described as Al-Qayyum, the one who holds everything up, which implies that existence is not self-running. The universe is not a clock wound once and forgotten. Every moment continues because it is allowed to. And that's a very quiet idea. Nothing dramatic happens when sustaining continues. Things just remain. Your heart keeps beating. Gravity keeps working. Light keeps traveling. No announcement, no applause. And the Quran casually reminds you that if sustaining stopped, even briefly, there would be nothing left to discuss, which reframes anxiety in a strange way. Most human fear is about losing control, but here, control was never yours. You're not holding things together, you're being held. And once you accept that, the universe feels less hostile. Still challenging, still demanding, but not random. Now let's talk about the human role again, because the Quran never really lets you forget it. Humans are described as khalifa, caretakers, not owners, which is a subtle correction. You don't own the earth, you manage it. You don't own time, you pass through it. You don't own knowledge, you receive it. And caretakers are accountable, not micromanaged, accountable. Which is why ethical behavior matters in this worldview. Justice is not optional, mercy is not extra credit. They are aligned with how creation itself is structured. The Quran repeatedly links moral corruption with environmental and social imbalance, not metaphorically, directly. When corruption spreads on land and sea because of what people's hands have earned, which sounds suspiciously modern for a text over 14 centuries old, the point is not doom, it's cause and effect. Creation reacts, not emotionally, systemically. And humans are warned calmly that actions ripple. Now something else the Quran does that's easy to overlook in a sleepy listen. It never romanticizes the past. Earlier generations are not described as wiser, just earlier. They had prophets, they had warnings, they made choices. Some did well, some didn't. No nostalgia, which keeps listeners from idealizing history.
The golden age is not behind you. It's not ahead of you either. It's irrelevant. What matters is alignment now. And then there's knowledge. The Quran speaks often about learning, about observing, about reflecting, but it also draws a boundary. Knowledge without humility is described as dangerous, not forbidden, dangerous, because it leads to arrogance, which, if you remember, is how the whole Iblis situation started. I am better. That sentence echoes throughout human history. It shows up in empires, in families, in arguments that don't need to exist. And creation itself seems to resist arrogance. Stars collapse, mountains erode, nothing stays dominant forever, which is either unsettling or comforting, depending on how attached you are to permanence. The Quran leans toward comfort. It repeatedly reassures that nothing good is lost, no effort wasted, even intentions are counted, which makes the universe feel less indifferent, more attentive, not obsessed, attentive. Now let's gently touch the idea of destiny again, because people always worry about it. If everything is written, what's the point? And the Quran responds without philosophy lectures. You choose, you act, you are responsible. Divine knowledge does not force behavior, it simply knows it, which is not explained further, intentionally, because some things are not meant to be fully untangled, they're meant to be lived with. Like gravity, you don't need to understand it to fall, and you don't need to fully map destiny to make meaningful choices. The Quran consistently brings things back to practice. Pray, give, be fair, speak truth, avoid cruelty, not because the universe demands it, but because you function better when you align with reality. Now, one last quiet thing before we drift towards silence. The Quran describes Allah as Al-Salam, the source of peace, which is unexpected. Powerful creators in stories are usually dramatic. Here, the defining attribute is peace, and paradise is described not as endless excitement, but as rest, no fear, no grief, no exhaustion, which suggests that the deepest human desire is not thrill, it's relief, relief from effort, relief from uncertainty, relief from decay. And that relief is presented as a return back to the one who began creation in the first place, which brings the whole story into a quiet circle. Allah alone, creation begins, humanity struggles, guidance repeats, and eventually return. No rush, no chaos, just completion. So if your thoughts are slowing now, if the edges of this story are blurring into rest, that's fine, that's appropriate. This was never meant to be absorbed all at once. It's meant to echo, to sit somewhere in the background, like stars you don't always look at, but are still there. We'll stop here, not because there's nothing left to say, but because silence is part of the design too. Good night. Let creation keep doing what it's always done, and let you finally rest.
All right, still here. Which means we're officially in the softest layer of the story now. This is the part where nothing new really happens, and that's kind of the point, because one of the most unusual things about the Quranic account of creation is how little it evolves over time. Human societies change constantly, languages shift, technology explodes, but the message? It stays stubbornly the same. Over centuries, across continents, through wildly different cultures. Worship Allah alone. Be just. Remember where you came from. Remember where you're going. No upgrades, no expanded universe lore, no sequel revelations with new rule sets, just repetition. Which might sound boring until you realize humans are the ones who keep forgetting. The Quran openly acknowledges this. It describes humans as forgetful by nature, not evil by default, not malicious, distracted, pulled in too many directions,
which explains why reminders are repeated so often. Creation is mentioned again and again, not because the listener didn't hear it the first time, but because the listener stopped noticing it. The sun still rises, the heart still beats, and familiarity dulls awareness. So the Quran keeps nudging. Look again, think again, slow down. Even the language reflects this. Verses about the universe are rarely long. They're brief, observational, almost like side comments. And he created the night and the day, and in that are signs for those who reflect, which suggests that the problem is not lack of evidence, it's lack of attention. Now, let's talk about something the Quran does not do, because that's just as important. It does not try to explain everything. There is no detailed cosmological map, no timeline with measurements, and that restraint is intentional, because over-explaining invites arrogance. Humans love to mistake information for mastery, and the Quran keeps knowledge slightly out of reach, enough to inspire awe, not enough to dominate. It constantly redirects curiosity toward humility. You can study creation, you can explore it, you can name stars and measure distances, but ownership, control, never implied. And whenever humans start feeling too secure, the Quran reminds them of fragility, not harshly, just factually. Sleep comes unannounced. Illness arrives without invitation. Death doesn't consult calendars. Which is not meant to frighten, it's meant to ground. This world is temporary. That's not a threat, it's context. Now let's drift toward human behavior again, because creation and ethics are always linked here. The Quran never separates belief from action. Belief without behavior is treated as incomplete, and behavior without awareness is treated as hollow. So the universe becomes a moral backdrop. How you treat others matters because creation itself is balanced. Oppression disrupts balance. Excess disrupts balance, neglect disrupts balance, and imbalance always corrects itself eventually, not magically, naturally. This is why the Quran speaks so often about justice, not as an abstract ideal, but as alignment with reality. Unjust systems collapse, arrogant rulers fall, not because the universe is angry, but because imbalance cannot sustain itself forever. And again, this is said calmly, no cheering, just observation, and those were their dwellings after them, which is a very understated way of saying, they're gone now. And then the Quran moves on, because lingering on ruins doesn't rebuild anything, reflection does. Now, here's another quiet detail. The Quran often pairs creation with mercy. Rain falls, crops grow, not because people earned them, but because Allah is merciful, which reframes entitlement. Provision is not proof of approval, it's opportunity. Opportunity to be grateful, opportunity to share, opportunity to act responsibly. And ingratitude is not just saying thanks, it's behavior, waste, cruelty, indifference. These are framed as failures of awareness, not ignorance of facts, ignorance of meaning. Which brings us back again to why this story is told at all. It's not to impress, it's not to debate, it's to orient, to answer the quiet questions humans ask when everything finally slows down. Why am I here? Why does this matter? Why does anything exist at all? And the Quran's answer is never complicated. You are here to know your Creator, to live with integrity, to return. And creation exists to support that journey, not to replace it, which is why the universe is described as a signpost, not a destination. Enjoy it, care for it, but don't mistake it for the end. Now, if your mind is drifting, if sentences are starting to blur, that's fine. This story works best when it's not fully held.
It's meant to sink below conscious thought, to sit quietly, like a background hum. The universe doesn't rush, neither should you. In the next part, if there is a next part, we'll rest even deeper into the idea that guidance itself is mercy, and that being reminded is not an insult, but a kindness. But for now, let repetition do its work. Let the same truths pass by again, softly, unannounced, exactly the way the universe itself does.
All right, welcome back to the slow lane. By now, the universe has been created. Humanity has wandered through history. Guidance has arrived, repeated itself, and patiently waited to be noticed. And here we are, still being reminded. Which tells you something important. The Quran doesn't assume that hearing the truth once is enough. It assumes distraction is constant. Life gets noisy, responsibilities pile up, urgency replaces reflection. So reminders arrive softly, over and over, not to shame, not to scold, just to reorient. And this is where the Quranic view of creation becomes almost compassionate, because instead of saying, "You should have known better," it says, "Let me remind you again." Creation itself becomes part of that reminder system. Sunrise, sunset, birth, death, growth, decay. Not dramatic, predictable, which is exactly why they work. They repeat. And repetition, when it's gentle, reshapes awareness. The Quran often asks questions it already answers elsewhere. Were they created from nothing? Or were they the creators? These aren't riddles, they're pauses, moments to slow the mind. Because most confusion doesn't come from lack of answers, it comes from rushing past them. Now, let's sit briefly with the idea of nothing. Before creation, there is no universe waiting to be filled. There is no empty space. There is no void humming patiently. There is nothing. And that nothing is not lonely, not chaotic. It's simply the absence of creation. Allah exists without needing contrast, which is hard for humans to grasp. We define ourselves by context, roles, relationships. Allah does not, which is why the Quran never tries to fully describe Him. It describes what He is not limited, not tired, not unaware. And then it describes what He does, creates, sustains, guides, and leaves the rest intentionally open, because mystery keeps humility intact. Now, one of the quieter themes that keeps surfacing is trust. Creation works because it follows command. Stars don't hesitate. Cells don't rebel. Humans, however, are asked to trust voluntarily, which makes trust meaningful, not automatic, not programmed. And trust in this framework doesn't mean pretending things are easy. The Quran never denies difficulty. It acknowledges grief, fear, loss, but it places them inside a larger structure. Nothing is isolated. Nothing is random. Even pain is not meaningless, though meaning may take time, sometimes more time than a human lifespan. And that's okay, because outcomes are not limited to this world, which again shifts pressure. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to resolve history. You are responsible for intention and effort, not cosmic closure. That belongs elsewhere. Now let's drift toward another recurring idea. The Quran repeatedly reminds humans that they were not consulted about creation. You were not asked if you wanted to exist. You were brought into existence, which is not framed as an imposition, but as a gift, a trust. And every trust comes with responsibility, but also support. Guidance is provided. Conscience exists. Reflection is encouraged. You are not dropped into chaos without tools, which makes accountability fair.
No one is judged for what they never had access to, and that fairness is emphasized constantly. Allah knows capacity, limits, context, which makes judgment feel less terrifying and more precise. Now here's something else the Quran does quietly. It normalizes doubt to a point. It acknowledges questioning, reflection, even hesitation. What it challenges is arrogance disguised as certainty, refusal to learn, refusal to reconsider. Because the creation story itself invites curiosity. Look, think, reflect. Those verbs appear constantly. And yet the Quran also warns against endless argumentation, not because truth is fragile, but because humans can turn inquiry into avoidance. At some point, reflection must lead to action. And action, in this worldview, is surprisingly modest. Be honest, be kind, be just, care for those weaker than you. Don't corrupt what you are entrusted with. These are not grand heroic tasks. They're daily, quiet, unnoticed, which mirrors creation itself. The universe doesn't shout about its existence. It just exists. Faith here is meant to do the same. No spectacle required. And now, as we reach this part of the story, things feel almost circular. We're back to awareness, back to stillness, back to the same reminders we started with, which tells you the structure is intentional. Creation begins quietly. Guidance continues quietly. Return happens quietly. Noise belongs mostly to humans. The rest of existence is remarkably calm. So, if your thoughts are slowing, if this feels repetitive, that's not a flaw, that's alignment. Repetition is how meaning sinks in, not through excitement, but through familiarity. In the next part, and yes, there is still another part, we'll rest even deeper into the idea that being small in a vast universe is not a weakness, but a relief. But for now, let the reminders keep looping, softly, patiently, just like they always have.
All right. Still drifting. Still no sharp edges. By this point in the story, something subtle has probably happened. The universe feels very large, and you feel smaller, which in most modern storytelling would be framed as unsettling, existential, maybe even a little depressing. But the Quranic perspective does something unexpected with that feeling. It leans into it. Because being small here is not a failure, it's a release. You are not responsible for holding the sky up. You are not required to keep the sun burning. You are not managing the orbit of galaxies at 3 in the morning. That work is already taken care of, which quietly removes a lot of pressure humans tend to carry without realizing it. The Quran consistently pushes back against the idea that humans must be central to everything. Important? Yes. Central? No. And that distinction matters. Because when you believe everything depends on you, anxiety becomes permanent. When you realize the universe has been running just fine without your micromanagement, rest becomes possible. Creation in this framework is not fragile. It is deliberate, stable, held. And humans are invited to participate, not dominate. Now, let's sit with how often the Quran brings up scale. It talks about ants and stars, seeds and mountains, single atoms and entire nations. It jumps effortlessly between them, which subtly trains the listener to stop ranking existence by size. Small does not mean insignificant. Large does not mean important. Everything has its place, and everything is known, even things humans overlook, which again, quietly, comforts the listener. You are seen, not because you're impressive, but because awareness is complete. And then there's time. Humans experience time linearly: past, present, future, regret, anxiety,
memory pulling backward, fear pulling forward. But Allah is not bound by time. Which means guidance is never late, even when it feels like it. The Quran often responds to impatience with reminders of long arcs. Previous nations thought consequences would never come. They always did, eventually, not suddenly, gradually, like erosion. And that gradualness matters because it tells you that most outcomes are not dramatic, they're cumulative. Choices stack, habits form, paths narrow, and one day you look back and realize you've arrived somewhere. Which is why the Quran emphasizes consistency. Small good deeds repeated, small wrongs repeated. Nothing explodes overnight. The universe does not behave like that, and humans are advised not to either. Now, there's another quiet relief in being small. You don't have to know everything. The Quran openly states that humans are given only a little knowledge, not as an insult, as a boundary, which saves you from chasing impossible certainty. You are not required to resolve every mystery. Some things are left intentionally unanswered, not because answers don't exist, but because knowing them wouldn't help you live better. And the Quran is deeply practical in that sense. It doesn't reward curiosity for curiosity's sake. It rewards reflection that leads to humility. Now, let's talk about effort, gently. The Quran never demands perfection. That expectation doesn't exist. What it asks for is sincerity, direction, trying again, which is why repentance is mentioned so often. Not because people are expected to fail constantly, but because failure is expected occasionally, and the door back is always open, which keeps despair from settling in. Despair in this worldview is not wisdom, it's a misunderstanding of mercy. And mercy here is expansive, not permissive, expansive. There's room to return, room to adjust, room to grow. And growth is slow, deliberately so, just like creation itself. Now, notice something interesting. The Quran never tells you to escape the world to be spiritual. It doesn't glorify isolation. It doesn't praise withdrawal. It asks you to engage ethically. Family, trade, community, all part of worship, which means the universe is not a distraction from faith. It's the context for it. Mountains are not sacred because they're impressive. They're sacred because they remind you of stability. Night is not holy because it's dark. It's holy because it allows rest. Everything has function, and humans are healthiest when they respect that. Overwork is discouraged. Excess is discouraged. Waste is discouraged, not because restraint is aesthetic, but because imbalance leads to harm. Again, cause and effect. Now, let's return briefly to the idea of return itself. The Quran describes death not as annihilation, but as transition, a return to the one who initiated existence, which reframes fear. Death is not falling off a cliff, it's going home. Accountability exists, yes, but so does familiarity. The one you return to is the one who created you, not a stranger, which softens the concept. And the universe, at the end, folds back into silence, not destruction for the sake of destruction, completion, which mirrors the beginning. Allah alone, creation unfolds, creation returns, and Allah remains, which means existence is not a straight line, it's a loop, origin to return, meaning anchored at both ends. Now, if all of this feels quiet, good, that's intentional. This story doesn't want adrenaline, it wants acceptance. Acceptance that you don't have to be enormous to matter. You don't have to be loud to be meaningful. You don't have to solve the universe to live well inside it. Sometimes being small in a vast, well-ordered creation is the most comforting thing of all. In the next part, Yes, there is still one more gentle stretch. We'll rest with the idea that rest itself is sacred, and even listening to this story right now fits neatly into the rhythm of creation. But for now, stay small, stay still. The universe has you exactly where you need to be.
All right. This is the part where nothing is expected of you. No conclusions to reach, no insights to extract. Just rest. Because one of the most overlooked themes in the Quranic view of creation is that rest itself is intentional. Not laziness, not escape. Rest. The universe is built on rhythm. Day and night, movement and stillness, work and pause. And humans are not exempt from that pattern. In fact, humans are warned against breaking it. Night is described as a covering, a gentle one, something that wraps the world and quiets it down. Sleep is not framed as weakness, it's mercy, a daily reminder that you are not meant to be conscious, productive, or alert all the time. Even prophets slept. Even the most devoted rested, which quietly shuts down the idea that exhaustion equals virtue. Creation itself pauses. Stars burn steadily, yes, but even they follow cycles. Nothing is frantic, nothing is rushed. And the Quran keeps returning to this calm pace. It never urges urgency for urgency's sake. Even repentance is not demanded with panic, it's invited. And that invitation stays open. Now think about where you are in the story right now. You're listening, not producing, not striving, just receiving, which mirrors revelation itself. The Quran was not written by humans reaching upward, it was received, descending, quietly, gradually. And that gradualness is key. Guidance is generous, forgiveness is generous, time is generous. Even endings are generous because they prevent endless decay. The universe is not designed to exhaust itself forever. Neither are you. So if your thoughts are fading now, if sentences are slipping past without being fully caught, that's not failure, that's alignment. You're matching the pace of the story, slow, measured, unconcerned with urgency. And that's exactly how creation itself unfolds. This story doesn't ask you to do anything tonight. It just asks you to remember quietly that you are part of something vast, intentional, and held. Let the night do what it was made to do. Cover the world, quiet it down, and let you rest inside it. Good night.